Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to this very special launch episode of the Celtic Exchange, coming to you just hours after Celtic have clinched a truly historic 12th consecutive top flight trophy. I'm your host Tino, and this evening I'm joined by Mif and Anton as we discuss just how big an achievement this has been for Neil Lennon and his players. Some people may accuse us of being glory hunters by launching the show on the day we secure such an historic achievement, and those people are absolutely correct. I think we've earned the right to have our say though, and as the man Martin O'Neill once said, we will do everything we can to bring some success to this podcast, or at least something like that. So to get us started, Mif, Anton, welcome both to the show, and to you first, Mif, where do you start with that today?
Oh, Tino, well, it was a roller coaster to say the least. The dominance of the first half, the Celtic that we all know and love. I don't think it's any coincidence we've saved our best performances this season probably for Hampden. The Aberdeen game was pretty similar, but then, geez, it was just the second half was just horrendous. And I think what you've seen, it shone a light. The game shone a light on what we are this season as a team, and that is, whilst there is still occasional brilliance, they seem heavily weighed down with the pressure, and there is now a fragility within the team. And the defence is the spotlight of it, but it's clearly the entire team, the structure of the team and how they defend. And every time the ball got put in the box, it was just a heart attack moment. But what I would also say was the concession of needless free kicks was just a constant frustration. But post-mortems are probably for another day. The enormity of the achievement did kind of overcome me slightly at the end when Big Aya put that penalty away. But a momentous achievement, but absolutely put through the mill.
Yeah, roller coaster
in order to get there.
What about yourself, Anton? What do you make of that today?
I think my overwhelming emotion is relief, to be honest, after that. It's great, of course, to get our 12th trophy in a row, and the quadruple treble is finally, after months and months of waiting, it's finally been achieved. But the first 45 minutes I thought looked really comfortable, but from the second half onwards it was I think I've not experienced that since I watched The Passion of the Christ, to be honest. It was torture in itself.
Another classic.
But absolutely. But I think Hearts, just like many of our opponents recently, have just kind of smelt blood. We gave them a lot of encouragement, but somehow we managed to find a way to win, and that's been something that we've been able to do over these last few seasons and pick up another trophy.
And it's, as you say, an absolute roller coaster. And we spoke just there on the instant match reaction, but we'll go through some of the finer detail of the game. But at the end of the day, you either win it or you don't, and they won it. So that's first and foremost huge achievement. But yeah, it's definitely a roller coaster of emotions, and it's become par for the course there in recent weeks. And we definitely have this fragility thing going on where we can take the lead, we can score goals, but the moment we concede, and it's almost the moment we concede, there just seems to be serious doubt that sets in.
I mean, the combination was start of the second half conceding so early. It was like just happening in slow motion. You could see Big Ayers shot the first tackle down, slow reaction to the loose ball, comes back, gets recycled, gets put in the box. Big Duffy has a look, can see somebody coming in at the edge of the box, and he almost kind of just repositions himself, and the ball's just perfect for Boyce. Boyce is a quality operator, especially for that level. International striker, scored goals over a number of years, and it was a great header for Boyce. As soon as that goal hit the back of the net, you could just see the weight of the expectation and the pressure arrive on the players' shoulders. And whilst it's been said, these players have serial winners and they've took us to the point where we've been able to achieve a quadruple treble. I think I watched through BBC commentary, and I think they said there was only 4 players started for Celtic that started in the final last year or the last final against Hearts. So that in itself tells you, there's obviously a difference whilst we still think of it as the same squad.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily the case. So, the pressure was on those guys on the park, and I think you just saw the belief kind of like drain away from them because of what was at stake and the ramifications for them and possibly the manager if they didn't win it.
Yeah, so speaking of the team, we'll have a look at the lineup first of all, and you can give me your thoughts on that. So obviously the big talking point was Scott Brown coming back in. So Connor Hazard, making only his 3rd appearance for Celtic, started in goals. Ayer stayed out at right back, Taylor held on to his position at left back, and Julian and Duffy in the centre. Then you'd Scott Brown and McGregor sitting in front of that with David Turnbull in the more advanced role. Ryan Christie on the right-hand side, which I think a lot of people predicted as well, in place of Frimpong. Moyel Yunusi on the left and Odson Edward up top. So any huge surprises, Anton? I think you called it in terms of Brown getting the start. So what was your own thoughts on the lineup?
To be honest, it was the lineup that I would have picked. So I've no complaints regarding the starting 11. I think that the back four gives us generally a little bit more stability. So I was quite confident when I saw the lineup, and I think that was borne out by how we performed in the first half. The BBC commentator had said that they feared for Hearts in the first half and how the game had developed, and it looked as if we were going to go on and score a few more. We didn't see what was going to happen in the second half. Perhaps we should have, given what's been happening in the last few months, but just the encouragement that we may have taken from the last couple of games, you thought, hopefully, to use the cliche, we've turned a corner here, but the same old things came back to haunt us a wee bit and put us through the mill.
What did you think of the lineup, Mif? Were you quite pleased with it?
All the chat before the game was Sorrell, Brown, who'd been goals. Based on the way the first half went, I don't think you could really argue with the team selection because it bossed the game and it put us in a position where we were 2 goals up. That said, there are elements of the first half where Hearts didn't really need to do much to cause us problems. You know, just a simple ball kind of down the line. And I don't know if is that to do with actual team selection. I think it's more to do with just the structure of the team. We'd spoke previously about playing with a kind of 4-2-3-1, maybe put less pressure on the fullbacks because they had somebody in front of them, and it meant if they went beyond them, they weren't worrying about losing the ball and being exposed. But it just seemed to be a different type of problem. Just the ball down the channel caused us a lot of hassle today. I think Taylor playing was probably the right idea. I felt the substitutions that were made when they were made were a wee bit odd in my opinion. Thought Taylor, Elyounoussi and Turnbull were all playing pretty well. By the same token, a change had to come because the momentum of the game had just swung so much in favour of Hearts that I can completely understand. He's just went, right, freshen it up with the wings and try and go and get him behind them, get Wax out, get Frimpong on to go beyond them.
I think that it was really, we talk about team selection a lot here, but I think it was a kind of domino effect of that first goal. And I think that first goal, it came as a cumulative effect of defensive or lack of cohesion over the last few weeks and months, chopping and changing the defence all season. I think that guys didn't know who they were picking up. Julian had kind of let his man go. Duffy was kind of stuck with 2. Taylor didn't really tuck in and support Duffy. So there was a couple of them, that could have attacked that ball.
If you look at Big Ayer, how he's performed in the first half specifically, he's been an outlet, he's driving the team forward, he's shown a lot of energy. I'd seen somebody saying probably took a really good driving midfield player and turned him into a fairly average centre-half, which I think's a wee bit harsh. I think he's a bit better than that when he plays at centre-half, but you take the point, he is a driving force. He seems to be better utilised in that position for getting us forward. But likewise, it was him that kind of caught. He was sleeping a wee bit for their first goal. I suppose today was just one of those games where the selection, he's got it right. You need to say he's got it right because we were 2-0 up cruising in the first half. I don't necessarily think it's purely just down to the team selection as to why things went south in the second half. I think it's just more to do with the occasion, what's at stake, and also in the context of this season and what the players have been through.
Yeah, and you ask anybody at half time, has he got the selection right? Absolutely, spot on. Lenny's done the right thing. Ask the very same guys on 70 minutes, it's all about the selection. So he can't have it right and wrong, and some fans can't have it both ways. And I think you're right, Mif. I don't think Celtic's problems right now are down to the individuals that he's picking. They're all, talented and experienced players. A lot of them are serial trophy winners. They know how to win games of football. It's not about, it's almost irrelevant who he picks, i.e. you should be able to pick any 11 of the Celtic squad and they should be capable of beating, Championship Hearts, Ross County, St Johnstone, and all these teams that we've struggled with or struggled against in recent weeks. And I think we've talked before, it really does for me, anyway, and you lads might think different, but for me it just comes down to some sort of collective mindset. I heard Lenny's interview when I was coming in, heard it on the radio, and he talked about the immense pressure of the quadruple treble. That now, in a successful way, has been lifted. The players no longer have to have that on them every minute of every day, and the pressure that must bring. So obviously it's fantastic to be talking about this, having won that. But whether they won or lost today, at least that pressure would have gone. So maybe that will free up some players to play with a bit more or a bit less pressure. Because it's clear that they have been. They're not struggling because they're not good players. They're struggling because of something mentally, and I think that's really clear.
I'd agree with that. I think that we've been talking about selection and things like that, and you could even negate tactics maybe even a bit. I think, as you say, there is a mental issue with it, and it comes down to, I think, confidence particularly. There's a real lack of confidence in the team, and you see players second-guessing themselves, overthinking decisions on the ball, lunging into tackles when they don't have to, being really rash with decision-making, and it just bleeds throughout the team. And you've got young guys coming into that team, or inexperienced players. You know, they can't depend on the usually dependable experienced players who are, you know, they can rely upon and maybe bounce off and get some confidence from. You know, they're not playing well, so I mean, you look around the team for a bit of assurance and it's not really there. So you get guys like young Hazard, who obviously was a little bit rash on a couple of occasions today, and that's what happens when teams are lacking confidence.
Yeah, there was a moment just about the hour mark. I'm almost hoping we could have bypassed it, but we definitely can't, where Julian and Duffy just decided to tackle each other. It was a real Keystone Cops. How many
times have we seen that this season? You know, the amount of times our defenders, 2 or 3 of them, going for the same ball, and then sometimes even leaving a couple of players unmarked.
Mm-hmm. And they're not kids. They're not 19 and 20 and 21. So Julian, I think, is 28. Duffy, in fact, I think they're about the same age. So they're well experienced. They've played lots of, you know, top flight football or top level football. But actually, that's when I really noticed the change in tone across the board. It was almost like they made that mistake. The lad had a chance and Hazard done well to save it. Could easily have been 2 each though. But they made that mistake, and it's almost like the whole team just went, all right, that's us back to doing that again. And everything just seemed to go backwards from there.
I mean, we could probably do a separate podcast on Julian's low pain threshold. That's for another day. Julian is actually in control of that situation and can clear the ball. Sees Duffy and stops. Now, again, doesn't matter what level you've played at. I've played at a very low level with Tino.
I've been there.
Just shout and clear the ball.
Yeah.
You know, and these are the basic things which you need to remember. The vast majority of this team went away to Lazio and won last year. And I know we keep going on about that and harping on about it. They also went to Ibrox as well and defended as a really solid unit. For whatever reason, this season, the whole team, the defence, the spotlight's on them. The keeper situation, which we've went on about, you know, whatever combination it is, playing at centre half, just take that individual responsibility. And the fact that they're not doing it, like you have alluded to, Tino, can only be a mental problem, as in the pressure of the ongoing situation that they're mired in. But surely to me, if you've came and you've signed for Celtic, right, doesn't matter who you're, you know, you don't need to have grown up in Royston and have a tricolour up in your belt to know the significance of what this season is. Players that have been brought in, scouted, agreed their contract terms, would have been told, you know, what's at stake and what we're going for, what we've achieved. They would have known that even if they'd done their own homework. For the players to be so heavily weighed down by it, the question I'd ask you is that because the fans aren't there to support them? You know, Lennon made that quip at the AGM, which I thought, actually somebody posted a video on Twitter, what he actually said compared to how it was reported. He wasn't quite saying.
Yeah.
It was just, Celtic miss their fans more than anybody else in the whole world, and it's the biggest problem that we've got. To me, it just seems to be individuals are just making crazy decisions.
Yeah,
for some reason.
I mean, that actual incident there, I don't know if it was because, you know, Duffy doesn't speak French or Julian doesn't speak Irish, but something's going wrong there. But the language barrier shouldn't kick in. You just call your name and you just put your boot through it, and that's it. And it, I mean, as Mif said, we've played amateur stuff in lower level football and whatever else, but it's basic stuff. It's stuff you get taught as a kid. It's like, do you know what? Call your name and clear your lines. And Mif's got 2 young boys that play football, and it's similar messages, you know, clear the danger and you regroup and you move on. Celtic should be no different from that. So it's just, it really, that one moment was really amateur stuff. There's no getting away from it. And, you know, they're 2 guys who I sincerely hope go on to do well. And, you know, Duffy's had such a hard time. And Julian has proven his worth, you know, several times last season. But I don't think it's because the 2 of them aren't good footballers that mistakes happened. It's just because there's not enough confidence and belief from one or the other to say, this is my ball, I'm clearing the danger, get out my road. And that just didn't happen there. And I wonder if that just then filters through to other guys.
I think there's a combination of, you know, second guessing themselves and overthinking things, trying to take responsibility, and maybe both of them at the same time thinking, I'll take the charge here, and getting in each other's way. But it just points to, you know, our biggest deficiency at the moment, which is the defence, and that has got to be a major focus for the team going forward over the next few games if we have to make anything of the rest of the season.
I also think there's something throughout this whole thing that we've no touched upon that I think really needs some close attention when it comes down to team selection for him, and that is Odsonne Edouard. Now, the penalties, absolutely magic. That's great. And, you know, have you seen McCann's comment? Neil McCann's
I've seen all of them. Do you want to share them with us?
Neil McCann had said he found it disrespectful.
Oh, there you go.
probably because a Celtic player's done it, to be perfectly frank with you.
100%.
Aye, no bother.
Would it have been
Mr. McCann.
disrespectful if Gordon just stood there and caught it?
Exactly.
It's a way to score a goal. I don't buy that at all.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm new to the podcast game, so I don't want to say any slanderous comments on MD that had an opinion on that. But my point is the overall general play of Edouard was somewhat lacking. He's extra motivated against Hearts, and I think you saw that when he came on. You know, he did put a lot of work in. But also, what Griffiths is, he's just a good general striker. You know, whilst he's an excellent predator and scores loads of goals, great technique, he just makes those, I don't want to say daft wee runs, but you know, those wee runs down the channel that just come naturally to him, that he's done all his days, and that's how he gets his goals. For me, I don't know how many times, first and second half, Edouard was just statuesque. Mm-hmm. Just if he's not getting the ball on his feet, he's not moving. And I'm not picking him out, I'm not singling him out in the sense that there were other players who didn't play to their potential today, or maybe looked a bit weighed down by the situation. But I think clearly with Edouard, this is an ongoing thing. He has just not hit anywhere near top form at all this season.
And I find it very strange because the penalty itself was absolute class, and there's only certain types of players in world football that can do that in terms of have the mindset to do that in a cup final, no less. I made the point as well on Twitter that Craig Gordon has probably faced more Odsonne Edouard penalties than most goalkeepers, albeit in training. So he knows his technique, he knows how the guy thinks, and he's still, the mind game, the battle of the minds there. Edouard has come out on top and then some. For Neil McCann to say it's disrespectful is just utter nonsense, in my opinion. Odsonne Edouard's job is to score goals for Celtic, and whatever technique he finds to do that, he's doing his job.
Well, I don't know what Neil McCann's opinion was on launching the ball at somebody after they've scored, didn't he, either, but he didn't really quite go into that.
Yeah, that wasn't quite as disrespectful.
I know, sorry to launch the ball at somebody. The thing about Gordon is, again, obviously you might start calling me Mystic Mif, but last week I did say that it was all set up for Gordon to save a penalty and be the hero. And when he saved Christie's penalty, I was just like, no, come on, man, come on.
It was a tough moment in the house, I have to say.
It does probably bring us back to the point of selection and the fact that Hazard started. The more general point there, and I might be going off at a tangent here, is that how have we allowed ourselves to get into that situation where Hazard has had to start in a cup final and Craig Gordon is in goals for the opposition? Because I know Gordon has a litany of mistakes behind him as well. Mm-hmm. He's cost us on more than one occasion, but he does produce big saves at big times as well. I don't think anybody would argue that of the keepers that have been available to us, Gordon's better than all of them. Yeah,
it's very strange how that's all come to be, and it just looks like just poor squad management and poor management overall. Because if the big hope was that Fraser Foster was coming in, which would have been great, you just say to Craig Gordon, just sit tight a wee minute, and if that deal comes in, you're absolutely free to go. Now, I know Gordon was out of contract, so he maybe held the cards there, but there's conversations to be had, and you could have said to him, listen, we'll pay you X if we can manage to get you in, and there's ways around that, and that's Celtic's job as a club to do that. But I think I made the point again in the pilot episode that at one point you had Scott Bain, last year's number 3, became this year's number 1. Now he's back to 2, maybe 3 in fact, because Barkas was on the bench. Conor Hazard, last year's number, nothing. He was nowhere near it.
No.
And I think he might have been out on loan last year. He comes in, graces that famous number 65 shirt for Celtic, and has a couple of decent games there against Lille and Kilmarnock. Couldn't have done much with the 2 Lille goals, untested against Kilmarnock, but looking a bit more confident and a bit more assured. And I made those points, but I wonder if I was just latching onto something. I was desperate for some goalie good news to talk about, and maybe that's what I've done. But he's made a real clanger for the third. Now, call it nerves, adrenaline, or maybe just not good enough, but he's come out to punch and got nowhere near it. What did you think of that, Anton?
I thought that, to be honest, and I hate to be hypercritical of the young guy, because I don't think it's actually his fault, as we mentioned earlier, that we shouldn't really be in this position where he's playing for us in a cup final. It's happening far too soon in his career and his development. But I thought that he could have done better for the second goal. I thought he was out-muscled far too easily, I think by Naismith it was. And for the third one, he's just come out, far too rash. So I feel for the lad. But just as you'd mentioned about Gordon, compared to the goalkeepers that we've got currently, I absolutely, you would probably have Gordon in there. However, I was just hoping that we could get a better goalkeeper than Gordon this season anyway. If that wasn't Foster, I was hoping that the recruitment would be good enough that, our incoming goalkeeper would be a guy that would enhance what we've
Absolutely.
got. Barkas hasn't done that so far. I don't know if there's holistic reasons, that he's not performing. The guy, as we've spoke about before, he came with a fairly highly rated. You'd mentioned last week, Mif, about Milan. We're looking at him and things like that.
I still need to get that verified, by the way. I really would like that.
Checked, could you?
I really would like that verified, because I'm not having it, if I'm being honest. But he's got pedigree, and I can remember the save he pulled off against us in the qualifier. It was a belter. I've not seen anything like that yet.
I've just had it confirmed that Maryhill Milan were actually.
Maryhill Milan. I could believe it.
The thing is with Barkas as well, people talk so much about he's not done a great deal wrong, and I mostly agree with that, but he's also just not stepped up when you want him to step up. Fraser Forster's the kind of goalie, and it's a high benchmark to be competing against, but Fraser Forster's a goalie that just does those things which run-of-the-mill goalies don't. He comes out, he saves penalties, he saves at feet, one-on-one, tipping things out the top corner, all these kind of things that we've just not seen at all from Barkas, and have no idea that if he's got it in his locker. But going back to Craig Gordon, if Craig Gordon was in the squad just now, he'd be number one all day long.
Absolutely.
He's easily the best and most competent of those four goalkeepers.
Forster had presence. Guys going one-on-one against him had to maybe think twice if they were going to score. Barkas and Bain have been, Barkas rather unkindly, one of my mates referred to him as a hologram in goals, and it's because every shot that he faces tends to go in, and hopefully the guy can come good, but I've got big doubts about that at this stage.
5 million is a lot of money to spend on a hologram, I have to say. A guy that should be coming in and doing a whole lot better. We mentioned as well, David Marshall, and somebody mentioned during the week actually on the radio, that John McLaughlin, who's now obviously at Rangers, they were both available on a free. So what's happening behind the scenes that someone has hopefully seen them on the radar and thought, okay, we could go Marshall, we could go McLaughlin. Now let's spend 5 million and go Barkas. I can't get my head around it, and I don't want to dwell too much on it today. So we'll move on from the goalkeeper. Good luck to young Hazard. Obviously became the hero in the end, which will do his confidence, no harm at all. And I hope he kicks on to bigger things. Might have been a bit of a sliding doors crossroads type moment in his career at such an early stage, but he's come through it in a positive way, and he'll be absolutely buzzing tonight, and why not? So looking further into the team, the main selection out with obviously the goalkeeping situation and sticking with Conor Hazard today was Scott Brown. Mif, how do you think he played overall? First half obviously really quite exceptional, but overall,
I mean, I suppose ultimately in extra time he's almost won you the game there. Our inability to see it out is kind of hindered how we would view that, but I think it was Billy Dodds on commentary. No, what I him. That's me name check Neil McCann and Billy Dodds on this. I'll be getting chucked off this about my only appearance.
Your media mates.
Billy Dodds had said you're looking for somebody to take the game by the scruff of the neck. The way that Brown came in, attacked that ball, we needed somebody to stand up. Nothing looked like it was going to happen. Devoid of inspiration, and in his came, charging in, won that header, and Griffiths is where a good striker should be there to prod it in. I thought Brown probably, in my opinion, justified his selection. However, probably should have been off the park before he had the chance to go and produce that header. As I say, the changes and maybe the timing of the changes were a bit odd to me, but ultimately I think over the piece Brown justified his selection from the start. I would say yes. And
I'd have to agree with that. As I said, at half time you'd have turned on and said that top man, absolutely bossing it, and then getting into the second half, I certainly don't think Scott Brown was the reason for the downfall and the backtracking and the defending we had to do.
I think that's the thing, Tino, that in these occasions a lot of people can look for a digestible person to pin that this person is why the things went wrong. But Scott Brown,
easy target.
Scott Brown is often the easy target, in these situations. But I wouldn't blame him for the way the second half went, for example. I think he had a good first half. I think he tired as the game went on, and I think that is, that points to the fact that we need somebody like Sorrell to take up that mantle going forward, and hopefully he can fill those boots.
I think the more general point on Brown is, I don't think people are necessarily screaming for him not to play at all. Mm-hmm. It's for him to be managed in a better way. And this almost mad, constant inclusion of him in midweek cup games, Europa games, home league games, when clearly you could change it up and freshen it up and give others game time. Yeah. Turnbull in particular as well, and we'll probably come on to him later.
I think that'll be interesting just on Wednesday night. So we play Ross County in the league on Wednesday night, obviously another very important game. It'll be interesting to see if after 90 minutes and a half or so of extra time, will Scott Brown be pitched in there again? For me, that would seem madness right away. I've not thought about it too much, but that would seem madness, and surely that is the absolute opportune moment to slot in Sorrow and let him, stake his claim.
He looked as if he had maybe a bit of a knock as well at the end of that, so I would be very surprised as well if he starts.
Yeah, so we'll see. That'll be an interesting one to digest next week. Mif, you'd mentioned David Turnbull there, and it's obviously very important to cover that. Not his best game by any stretch. Subbed off in the second half, and it looked a bit disappointed to be subbed off. It was funny as well, for me, even if a guy like Turnbull's not having a great game, his deliveries are spot on. And I think on a couple of occasions they let Christie hit some while Turnbull was on, and I think that's madness, because everything Turnbull puts into an area, it's dangerous, and it's in an tempting area for the centre halves to go and attack. Christie overcooks some time after time, and that happened again today. So I was disappointed to see Turnbull come off, but I didn't think he was having his best game. What was your thoughts on that, Anton?
I'd agree with that, but I think that's going to happen with young players. Guys, he's fairly new to the club. He's not got a lot of games under the belt, so I think we need to kind of temper our expectations of him. He's kind of just starting to be given his time in the starting 11, so he's going to have these off games from time to time. But I think there's enough to see from Turnbull that he will become, a good player for us. I think that his decision making at times he needs to work on that. He'll maybe try to have a shot from distance or tight angles where he could maybe lay somebody in. So I think he just needs to work on that. But I think that today wasn't his best, but I think we will see good things from him.
Yeah, and maybe the more he plays with the Edwards and the McGregors and the different guys around him, he'll know when you should be passing it, when you should be releasing it, and when you should be taking a shot and goal.
I think what differentiates Turnbull for the rest of the team is he has that ability to kind of turn both ways with the ball. I'm not a huge fan of Christie playing out wide. I think Christie either plays central or doesn't play. That's my opinion. I understand they wouldn't want to really play Johnson in a game today when he's not a lot of game time, so his hand was maybe forced slightly because of that. But if you've got Christie and Elanusi in the team, that isn't natural width. You've got two players that want to come inside. They want to drift down off the wing and affect the game in the inside. So you're playing with almost like kind of two inside midfielders rather than people that are got to go on the outside. That said, I thought Christie actually had a really good game today, and whilst his deliveries for set pieces leave a lot to be desired at times, he's energetic and he is always kind of niggling away looking to try and make something happen. He gets a lot of stick for hitting lots of shots and maybe trying outrageous from time to time, but he did it today, and that's what got us the lead. So I think you need a Christie in your team when we're playing as rigidly as we are the now. You need a Christie in your team to try that, because he has got the ability to pull it off, and he did do that today. With Turnbull, he picks up those excellent wee positions. He is a wee bit reminiscent to me of Rogic. He kind of does the things that Rogic used to do on a more regular basis. And I thought Turnbull produced two really brilliant moments today. The one where he did the keep up and put the ball in the box, which was just great skill and great vision, but also even better vision when he done that kind of wee chip ball through, or the kind of flicked ball over the top to Elanusi, which suggests to me the more he plays, the more games we get into him, the more we're going to see that type of thing from him. What he never had today was a fit and firing Odsonne Edouard to run in behind, which Eddie was doing last season without even thinking. You've seen a few times Turnbull picking up the ball, driving in that sort of 40 yards out space with the head up, and he was delaying a pass because there just wasn't the movement in front of him that he wanted. And that's in those occasions Anton's touched on it. He maybe takes a daft shot when he shouldn't, when he could be laying somebody in. So I'm really excited about the possibility of building a team around Turnbull with movement off him. Like I touched on the pilot episode last week, Johnson coming back is exciting as well. Is there any update on Forrest just on that point?
It's all very quiet on that front, and it'd be good to know, is it 4 weeks, is it 16 weeks, is it whatever? It's all very quiet, and I don't know if they've put a time on his recovery, so that is a concern, because he's a man who's often criticised, but you actually see how big a loss he's been. Because I'd like to dwell on that point actually, if you talked about the lack of width, the lack of genuine width in the team. And even if you look at, I think Moya Elanusi is also a 10, if truth be told. He's desperate to cut inside at times. Yep. He's definitely not a left winger. By the same token, Christie's not a right winger. And also further behind him, you've got Chris Ayer, who's definitely a central player, whether that's in midfield or centre defence. He's also not a wide player, but all of a sudden he's a right back. And Taylor of the starting lineup was actually the only natural wide player in the team. And a friend of mine made the point before the game, you're playing on Hampden Park, which is huge in terms of its width, and yet you can't capitalise on that because you don't have genuine wide men. And we've seen it, we've talked about it before, but Greg Taylor does get in some decent positions and cracks the ball off the first man, which is hugely frustrating. And it must be, to give a bit of defence to Odsonne Edouard, must be frustrating if as a front man you've made the run and maybe the right run and it doesn't get to you.
In fairness, today, guys got out wide and picked Edouard out. You know, he's missed a hat-trick of really, really good chances.
He has. Why are you speaking about him like this? So it's upsetting me.
I love him so much. I want him to do better. You know, we all know the player that's there. We've seen him last season. The reason our form's been so indifferent is because he's not been there to bail us out, let's be honest.
Yeah, it's enigmatic stuff, because to score the Panenka penalty in the way that he has done, that takes extreme confidence. Yet other aspects of his play aren't reflecting that confidence. You know, to go up and take it, you know, cup final, you know, pressure moment and deal with it so coolly. And then other times, I think the chances you're referring to him, if the one that he's kind of snapped at them and they both kind of maybe the undersole of his boot and skidded past. So he's giving you very enigmatic performances just now, which is troubling.
He is, in my opinion, absolutely top notch. So the reason that I'm constantly getting back to him is because I want him to do so much better, and I know he is capable of so much better. I have seen him produce endless quality over the course of a season, so we know he's capable of it. I just wish I could get to the bottom of it.
I think just what you said there about the service to him as well. You know, if the guys round about him aren't firing on all cylinders, then he's going to suffer as a result. Strikers are only as good as the service, you know, they get. And a lot of the time this season he's not really received a lot of good service, particularly in the last couple of months or so. Today, though, as you mentioned, he did have a few good chances that last season he'd probably have taken one or more of them. So absolutely, we all know what a great player he is, but there's just something not right there. And I think that it's been going on for a long time now, and there's maybe bigger issues in terms of whether, you know, he sees his future here. And I think that kind of can feed into confidence and motivation for the performances that we're all seeing.
I also think it's a bit of a two-way street in terms of Edouard is only as good as the service that he's getting, but likewise for the El Yunusis and the Christies and the Turnbulls, they're only as good as the runs that they're receiving in front of them. So, you know, if they look up and they're looking for that wee channel pass or in the back of the defence and Edouard hasn't made that run, which Griffiths maybe would do. Griffiths is more natural in terms of those runs perhaps, but you know, it works both ways, and I just think that they're not quite clicking, but the early signs are that maybe Turnbull and Edouard in particular, I think they're similar in terms of their wavelength.
Yep.
And I'd like to see them given ample opportunity. And for me, the time for experimenting with Klimala and stuff is long gone and should have been long gone. He should be there if absolutely required. Interesting that Ayeti didn't even make the bench today actually, but we'll not dwell on that for today's episode. But for me, it's Edouard with Griffiths, you know, certainly the number 2 striker, and I'd certainly like to be seeing what Turnbull and Edouard can do together with Griffiths coming in now and then when required.
We seem to be really potent attacking last year when we had Griffiths and Edouard in the same team. Frustrating thing's probably the fact that it's mainly down to Griffiths that he's not been in the team. I absolutely adore Lee Griffiths. I think he's probably one of the most underrated Celtic players of my lifetime for the point of view of contribution, but he's done enough to irk a lot of people who just don't see that dedication. I was delighted for him the day, both in scoring the goal and scoring his penalty. I think he whatever issues he has, we as a club just need to find a way of getting him fit and on the park scoring goals. If that is not going to be achievable, and we deem it not to be achievable over the next 6 months, we need to start looking for other options, because if Edouard is away in the summer, which I would wager will be the case, we're left with Ajay and Klimala very, very raw. I still think there's something to work with in there. He's got the right attitude, but Ajay, to me, I mean, if we thought Edouard's movement was poor today, if Ajay was on the park, he'd have, the guy barely moves.
I think it's similar to the goalkeeping situation, with when Foster was leaving, we thought we had the ready-made replacement coming in. I think similarly with the possibility of Edouard leaving, we brought in Ajay thinking that this was going to be the main man. And I think even back then, the minds were made up that we can't rely on Griffiths, unfortunately. Like you, I'm a massive fan of Griffiths. That left foot he's got on him is just unbelievable. You know, he's a brilliant from dead balls, brilliant in the box, great finisher. However, you just cannot rely on him in terms of fitness and availability. He just always seems to have calf injuries, it appears. So, you know, with all the ability he's got, it's just so frustrating. But with all that said, the guy that we brought in, Ajeti, I mean, he's just not up to scratch so far at all. And we talked about the lack of movement and things like that. I think, we mentioned this before, last week's pilot, I think we just bought the wrong type of striker. And as a result, you know, that kind of puts boundaries around our game and how the team plays. If we had a bigger kind of target man type, we could vary up the game a bit. You know, when the 1-2s around the box for Edward aren't working, we can go a bit longer. We can, you know, when our defenders are under pressure, we can go a bit longer and things like that. It just opens up a few more doors for the team and can maybe lighten the load a wee bit for them. Yeah,
and these concerns weren't there when Ajeti came in at first, because he was that penalty box predator. He scored a late winner against Dundee United, I think was his first in several goals. I think he had 5 goals in X minutes, as in he'd hardly even played full games for us, but he was still banging them in week after week. Since then, I don't know the stats as to when the last time he scored was, but he now looks like the kind of player that would be cast aside at a club like West Ham. He doesn't seem fit, doesn't seem hugely interested. He comes off the bench and goes through the motions. So again, let's not dwell on guys like that in today's podcast, but overall it's a concern in the striking positions, in that I agree with, I think Edward will move on, and you're left with, unfortunately, an unreliable Lee Griffiths, unless he can kick on from today, which should give him a boost. But overall,
I would hope so. I would hope
unreliable.
So. That's what I really hope.
And Klamala's not ready, so that could be a concern for next year. And as we know, Celtic aren't the best at forward planning, succession planning. Scott Brown being the absolute case in point for that. So anyway, overall, obviously kind of I'm forgetting we won a quadruple treble today. I don't know if we've kind of drifted off topic far too much there. So to bring it back to that, aside from individual performances and, you know, some enigmatic stuff going on at times, some positives in terms of Mikey Johnson coming back in, and I think that width will certainly help the team. Maybe he gets a nod on Wednesday as well, time will tell. But what does this result today mean for Neil Lennon, first of all, and for the club as a whole moving forward to the latter stage of this season, Mif?
It's difficult because that cup was from last season. So you're kind of, that's you finishing off that season. Quadruple treble, a historic achievement. For Neil Lennon, when we speak, as we get older, when we speak about this era, it's just going to be linked to Lennon. He started the journey to the 9. He's taken us to the quadruple treble. You know, the things he's done for us as a player and a manager, he's just inextricably linked with the club. I'm delighted for him, and you can see what it meant to him today. You know, I think for all we may have had issues with his management style, or perceived issues with his management style because of things that have happened over the past few months, what you can't say is it doesn't, you know, give his heart and soul for the club. And you saw today just how much that meant to him, the pressure that must have put him under. For a man that's obviously his own issues and you know, kind of demons to fight along the way, I think this secures Lennon's legacy as a Celtic great. However, where it leaves him going forward, I still don't know, because it's still there are still questions to be answered. We still don't look like a cohesive unit, but the post-mortem for that should be for another day, because this achievement is momentous. Yeah, it is a momentous achievement.
Definitely. And it should be a day to, you know, just mark the contribution that Neil Lennon has made to Celtic Football Club. You know, in terms of his role of honour, I think he's now won the Scottish Cup 4 times as a player and 4 times as a manager. He's the only person in Celtic history to win a treble as a player and a manager, which is outstanding as an achievement. Of the 12 trophies, I think he has lifted 5 of them. So he came in and followed a very, very high standard, a very successful manager in Brendan Rodgers, and has won 5 of them. Yet incredibly, on the night that he's clinched, you know, the 12th of 12 trophies, we're still talking about what may be in store for Celtic under Neil Lennon.
Supporters of other clubs often levy that as Celtic fans are, you know, winning all the time. Can it be that great? You know, you are joyless. You don't take any enjoyment out of winning because you win all the time, and you want your manager sacked because he lost one cup tie. But you know that's not really the case. The only reason I'm not half cutting is because I've had to come and record this podcast. You know, I would normally be celebrating. I'd normally be jumping about.
Really sorry to put you out, man.
You know, I'm keeping it nice and professional. But this is just such a momentous occasion. But at the same time, it bears thinking about that. everything hasn't been rosy in the garden, a garden which was very rosy. That's why we have to ask these questions. You know, it's as simple as that. Everybody wants to try and get to the bottom of why a team that looks so cohesive has now slipped to putting in performances like they did today in total command, and then putting you through that emotional ringer.
As a guy approaching my 40th year here on the planet, I do remember what it was like back in the dark old days, the 90s, Celtic Dahir and all that stuff. But you know, we've got to kind of take an overall look at, you know, how good these last few years have been. We've been absolutely spoiled rotten, and it's been a great era to be a Celtic fan.
Well, just on that point, Anton, we've saw by events this week how difficult it is to win a treble. So the fact that...
Or a cup at all.
Well, very catty, Tino, very catty. But you see the amount of skill, hard work it requires, but also the amount of luck to carry that over a 4-year period is just absolutely phenomenal. And it's, I suppose, the uncomfortable bit when we look at the whole legacy element is, what are your views, or are the fans' views in general on Rodgers? Because if you talk about the quadruple treble, you need to talk about the foundations he laid for it.
No doubt about it. You know, he did come in and he did make us a much more professional outfit. He raised the standards. He developed some good talents in the squad. And absolutely, you've got to give him credit for that. Obviously, the way he left a sour taste in the mouth. But in time, I think people will realise that his arrival at Celtic was a big moment in this current era that we find ourselves in, and a big part of the achievements that we've made.
Yeah, I have to say, I've got no huge axe to grind with Brendan Rodgers. He brought us phenomenal success. He turned us into a far more professional outfit than we perhaps had been. He inherited some sketchy stuff under Ronnie Dyler, and we had some amazing times under Brendan Rodgers. I do have an issue with the timing of how he left, but I think it's quite clear that his relationship with Celtic, whether it was Peter Lawwell directly or the board, it clearly run its course, and it looked like at the next possible opportunity he was off. Now, whether that's because he wasn't backed financially, or there's other things that he maybe wanted to maybe install at Lennoxtown or whatever, there's clearly been a partner of the ways and quite an acrimonious split, which is troubling in itself, because say what you want about him, you can't deny he's a real perfectionist, a real tactician, a real man manager, and a real success. You can see that with the Leicester team that he's brought to a couple of successes. Mif's giving me a funny look here. Are you?
He's been a bit more diplomatic than what I'd be, lads, I need to say.
I've got no huge issue, because he brought success to the club and he raised standards.
I acknowledge that.
The way he left a bit of a sour taste, but overall, I think his time will be well remembered. Maybe not next year, the year after, but in years to come.
I think as well we need to be prepared, because there will be departures like Rodgers and Tierney again. It's just unfortunate where Scottish football and Celtic's current place is in the food chain at the moment, that we will have future heroes come and go, future managers come and go, and that's just unfortunate. But it's a reality, and you know, the club is bigger than all of these individuals.
And just to take it full circle, I think that brings it back to the magnitude of the achievement, is that despite the constant flux that you've got, you know, all those heroes that have came and went through the past 4 seasons, and there is still a core of players within that squad that have managed to keep driving and take us over the line, you know, and somebody like a Scott Brown, a Lee Griffiths, a Tom Rogic, that have been there all the way through.
Marvin Comper.
Oh, right. Oh, geez.
Played his part.
Yeah.
It was at a cup appearance against Morton.
Yeah.
Keyed the ball with 30 yards for goal.
So there's some interesting stats here, just to kind of summarise the quadruple treble. So Celtic have won 147 out of their 180 games in the quadruple treble run. 36 of them have been cup wins, and they've drawn 22 and lost just 11 in 4 seasons of football. So credit where it's due, and obviously that's a combination of Brendan Rodgers and Neil Lennon. So what I'd like to ask out with the management and Mif's, his eyes were burning through me there when I was talking about Brendan Rodgers, so we'll skip past that. He looks absolutely furious, but in terms of...
It's a glorious day today. No time to be angry,
the 4 years of success, the 4 trebles in a row there. Who are the real heroes for you? Who are the standouts in terms of the players? An obvious one is obviously Scott Brown, but who else, you know, amongst those Brendan Rodgers teams and beyond were the real standout? What about you, Anton?
I think Moussa Dembele had an incredible impact in his time at Celtic, you know, for picking him up for a small outlay. We didn't really know too much about him. I just thought his rise was kind of meteoric, particularly in that first game against Rangers, where he scored the hat-trick, and instantly we're off to the races with him, and he was an excellent striker, and as I mentioned about, Rodgers and Tierney, he came here, he developed, he hit the heights, he improved the team by, being there and doing the business for us, and unfortunately had to move on. But he was an excellent striker for us, and I think he'll be looked back as one of the best strikers that we've had in the modern era.
I would agree with that, Anton. For me, Mikael Lustig is an absolute standout. I think the character that he brought to the team and within the dressing room is being missed right now. Scott Sinclair, who for 2 seasons was pretty much untouchable up here, and it's good to see he's got his form back for Preston as well. Again, quite a bizarre kind of almost bombing out of Sinclair when Lennon came in. I don't know if that was done for board level regarding his contract.
Yeah. The story is that Lenny, I don't remember the moment, but apparently in Lenny's first game back in charge, Sinclair gets subbed off at half time, which in itself was quite a rarity, and that maybe set the tone for how it played out. So I don't know, maybe he's just not Lenny's type of player.
His form had dipped, to be fair, towards the end of his time, but no doubt in his contribution, an excellent first couple of seasons. Somebody else I think we have to mention, we touched on him a wee bit earlier, and he's a much maligned character, James Forrest. James Forrest, his consistency over the last few years has been excellent, and I think he's incredibly underrated by a vast section of the support.
One of them sitting next to you.
I think that he's his goals and his assists over the last years.
I find them so frustrating, and it's incredible when you look at the stats.
Seriously?
James Forrest. Seriously. Don't come at me, Miff. You already had your Brendan Rodgers moment there. I think I just think
pro Rodgers, anti Forrest.
They're going to get us cancelled after episode 1. I just think that in a Bobo Baldy style, he's the kind of guy that the longer he's out the team, the better a player he becomes. Now, I'm not denying James Forrest is a talent, and he's played a huge part in the 9 and whatever happens beyond that, whether we clinch the 10. But I find him so frustrating. I think his decision making at times, the stats bear out, right? And I appreciate stats, but sometimes I also appreciate watching a game of football and seeing wasteful passes and things like
listen,
that.
Absolutely, and I know what you're getting at. He's far from the perfect footballer, but what I would say is he is highly effective for us, and again, not having him in the team to balance us out in terms of the width and the reliability, I think more than anything else that he brings. He creates goals, he scores goals, but he also does his shift as well for the team, and him being out the team, I think, really put it out of kilter. It's a contributing factor, it is a big contributing factor.
I agree. I think it's definitely highlighted the fact that if not James Forrest, then who? And I think it's because he's always been there. I think him and Scott Brown are certainly the only 2 players that have been part of the 9 all the way through. Callum McGregor's obviously picked up a lot of those titles, and as I say, if we go on to a 10th, then what an achievement that is in terms of James Forrest and Scott Brown. Just have my reservations on him overall, but yeah, obviously when you put it like that and look at his stats, look at his goals, and look at what's happening now and that genuine lack of width there, then yeah, it's obvious that we're crying out right now for a James Forrest, and an experienced guy at that. I don't know what age James Forrest is. He's not as old as you, Anton. He's
27.
Not 40, but he's
27.
Is he that? So he's late 20s. He's been round the block and then some. Played a lot of European football against top opposition. So we are missing leadership just now as well. And James Forrest is a quiet character, but he also just commands respect for what he's done in the game so far.
I think
you've got me convinced, Miff. I love that.
Is he not our most decorated player after
Brown?
Brown?
Yeah, he would be. Yeah. I think
he's won.
I think when you talk about the consistency of these guys as well, and we have to mention Mr. Consistency, Callum McGregor, who is going through a bit of a tough time this season, but I think his performances over the last few years as well have been very good. It'd be remiss of us to discount the contribution that he's made to this era.
I think when you mentioned earlier about Rodgers improving players, I think McGregor's probably the one, and also Forrest, that he had the biggest effect on. He really seemed to drag an extra level of performance out of them. I was never always utterly convinced with Callum McGregor. I know if people are listening to this, they'll probably think, well, that just shows what you know about football, but I think he has definitely matured and grown into a much better football player over time, and I think it's coincided with being played more centrally as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm the same, which you won't be surprised by. I wasn't wholly convinced by McGregor, and a lot of folks dig me up on it now because of the things he went on to achieve, and he really found a level of consistency. I think for a couple of seasons in a row there, he was most appearances in Europe for a footballer in terms of what he was playing domestically, internationally with his club and European competition. He's gone backwards this season, but who hasn't in a Celtic shirt? And that maybe is also part of a bigger picture under Neil Lennon. So this isn't the day to criticise Neil Lennon, but there's no doubt that guys like Callum McGregor, like James Forrest, like a very experienced at the time Scott Brown, all found a new level under Brendan Rodgers, and he also very much helped Kieran Tierney go into a new level. That doesn't seem to be the kind of manager. I wonder, and if this is where we're talking about the difference between a manager and a coach. Brendan Rodgers is an absolutely hands-on, attention to detail coach. I think Neil Lennon is a manager. He can get something out of individuals in a motivational sense, but I don't think he really focuses his time, and this is maybe just his approach, and there's there's a lot of success to show for it, but I don't think he says, right, okay, my task is to go and win another treble, 10 in a row. I'm not going to spend my time making guys better players, as in individually. They're either good enough or not, and once I get them in my team, I'll then go and motivate them and try and kick them onto new levels. So it's different styles, isn't it? But it's in real contrast, the Neil Lennon versus Brendan Rodgers approach. So that's just, again, as I say, it's such a huge day for Celtic, huge day for Neil Lennon. And I've said for long enough now, for the last number of weeks and months, I think there's Neil Lennon the manager and there's Neil Lennon the man, and I think Neil Lennon the man absolutely deserves everything that's coming to him today for the success. You mentioned it, Mif. He's faced all sorts of challenges, but over 20 years he's pretty much given his professional life for 20 years to Celtic Football Club, and there's no one that wants success for this club more than him. So I think it's just such a huge moment for him, and delighted on that. So we're drawing things to a close in terms of tonight's podcast. I suppose the burning question now, 12 titles or 12 top trophies in a row, phenomenal achievement for Celtic. Now it's back to league duty on Wednesday. Where do we now stand in the quest to pick up 10 in a row, Anton?
I think it's still a big ask. I don't think it's impossible, but we are kind of relying on snookers a wee bit. I think that we really need to find some form of cohesion in the backline if to have any hope of doing anything. If not, I think we're just walking into disaster come the trip to Ibrox at New Year. They don't look like conceding too many goals, and they look like they're able to exploit leaky defences like ours. Unfortunately, it pains me to say all that, but that's just the reality of where we are at the moment, and we really need to find a solution to that. I think today showed that maybe Hazard isn't quite ready for an extended run in the first team, but where does that leave us? I think the goalkeeping problem needs to be solved as soon as possible, whether that means going into the transfer market again at the new year, or do you just give Barkas a run and say, right, we're going to make you the number one. But to be fair, we've already done that a couple of times and it's not worked so far. So we've got a real problem there, but we need a solution if we have to have any hope of achieving anything this season.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be against us getting into the transfer market in January. It's obviously just round the corner, and finding someone who's just more reliable and more capable. We've used 3 goalies already this season. Might as well make it 4 for all it is. And whether that fourth guy could be Fraser Foster or not remains to be seen. Miff, what's your thoughts on the challenge ahead?
Basically, you don't win leagues by conceding the goals that we concede, and we've manoeuvred ourselves somehow into a position where we're playing major catch-up. Because of the gravity of the season, you don't want to turn and say it's gone, but that's not my favourite noise I've heard from you. I'm not overly confident, and I must say I'm not overly confident. If we manage to pull this off, it'll be the greatest ever.
I completely agree with that. What I would say is, despite how poorly Celtic have performed this season so far, they somehow still find themselves, albeit a bit out of the picture, but still find themselves in the mix. Should they win their games in hand, should they get a result at Ibrox, then it's all to play for. So I think it will remain to be seen what kind of impact today has on the team. As I said, the pressure of winning 12 trophies in a row must have been huge, and now it's gone, and it's gone in the most positive of fashion. So that's a real positive looking forward. And I just think there's a load that will be lifted off the players, and whether they can transfer that into taking that confidence into their defensive displays and taking that forward, who knows. In terms of going to Ibrox on the 2nd of January, what St Mirren during last week in Motherwell at the weekend have shown is that there is a way to nullify the clear threat that the wide areas Rangers have. They've got Tavernier and Barisic on the right and left hand side. They are dangerous players moving forward, but all of a sudden when teams just clock that and play well against it, you've seen that it was nullified. St Mirren done it perfectly well, and all of a sudden a guy Tavernier who couldn't stop scoring has had 2 very quiet and ineffective games. Now they've got other good players elsewhere, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it in the 2nd of January. But my overarching point is that the cloak of invincibility that they had around them, that is gone, and there's ways to get past them, and I feel they'll drop more points as we move forward.
If we can just put a wee bit of doubt in our head by somehow getting a result at that New Year's Day game or New Year game, then it gives us something, a little bit of optimism going forward, and a wee bit of doubt in their heads will test our mettle.
Well, I don't doubt that for a minute, but my issues are with us rather than with Rangers. I do think the time will come when they'll drop points and things like that. My concern is with us. Last year we put our run together, we won. I think we dropped points to Livingston and won 10 games in a row. I just can't see us doing that this year. If we don't do that this year, we won't put enough pressure on Rangers where they'll feel it. And I think that's because of the position that we're in right now. We've manoeuvred ourselves into that position. So that's my biggest concern. But listen, we've got quadruple treble in the bag. That must be a lot of pressure off the players. Here's hoping that just frees them up, express themselves, play with a bit of flair, and we can just go back to enjoy watching them playing again.
Aye, because that was hellish today. Hellish in a good way as soon as Big Eye had done the business. So yeah, in football, you could and should only be looking to your next game. So the next game for Celtic is Wednesday night against Ross County in the league. So for tonight, that brings to a close our very special launch episode here at the Celtic Exchange. Congratulations once again to Neil Lennon and his players. My thanks to Mif and Anton for joining us tonight. And finally, thanks to you for listening. We'll see you next week as the chase for 10 gets back underway.
Good night.
Sponsored by 1010 Podcasts.